we go. Right, down. Hi everyone. Cool. Essential Herbalism. Welcome to Essential Herbalism. We're going to do some supplementals of the organ systems that we missed during our 12-month course. That was the physical course that was actually done from the classroom when we met up. Reasons that we missed these organ systems was basically that we got rather engrossed on the digestive system, which instead of taking one session took 3 and that kind of thing. So time got away with us, which, do you know what, it was the first time we taught physically, so it was rather a large group, so that was understandable that we would get some hitches like that. So here we go, let's carry on. It's a bit of a sunny day. We're kind of blinded a little bit by the sun there, so I hope that you can see me. We're just dumped up a corner in the library, so we're not actually filming from the apothecary on this occasion. Apothecary's down there, simply because I'm working with my notes that are right here right now, so in front of me. And we're joined with B, who's on her chair, and I hope she's not going to be disruptive. Right, so let's start with the musculoskeletal system. This is one of the fundamental systems that we didn't get round to talking about in class, so let's go over this. I'm going to go relatively quickly, so you might want to pause me at any point, and I will try and upload some PDFs to support this session when I upload it onto the portal, so please do look for the PDFs for this as well. So one of the things to note here is one of the prime reasons that people see a doctor in these days, I'm sure you can guess, is for physical pain, whether that's acute or chronic. And the skill sets of our holistic tools are the treatment of pain, and most importantly, in the treatment of pain, we need to remember our strategies of being a herbal practitioner. So we need to be guarded against the treatment of the symptoms, because ultimately the pain is the symptom. So we need to be looking for inflammation, and we need to be looking for other important causes of these physical pains. So that's something to keep in mind, and I know you all know that, but just to refresh your memory. Right, so let's look at the anatomy and the physiology. So what we're looking at when we look at the anatomy and the physiology, obviously, of the musculoskeletal system is the baseline structure, the physical form, the shape, the tone, the support, and the capacity for full movement. It's kind of obvious, but we'll say it anyway. We tend to think of this when we talk about the anatomy and physiology of the physical system of the musculoskeletal system. We tend to think of bones and muscles, but what we also need to look at and be aware of when we think about that is the tissues involved in that. You know, it's not as simple as bones and muscles. We're looking at the tissues involved, so we're looking at the tendons, the ligaments, the cartilage. You're looking at teeth, cartilage. You're looking at various fluids that affect mobility. We're also looking at the fluids that affect flexibility, and they affect motion as well. You've also got the interconnectedness with the nervous system as well. So you've got the nervous system being really, really important in this treatment. On all of these various components of the musculoskeletal system are important to consider in the holistic, the whole treatment, because they're all dependent upon each other. So there's not one part of what we've just said that is like, well, we don't have to worry about that. We do have to worry about all of it. So it's not as, and this is why I started by saying it's a tricky system, really, because ultimately, sorry, there, sit down. Ultimately, what we tend to do is, more than probably any other system, we tend to be focused upon the symptom of the pain, and that's understandably so, because it's, to live in pain is terribly debilitating in both emotionally, mentally, physically. So I get why that is. However, we need to look beyond that. Even if we give some relief initially, we need to look beyond that to actually treat fully the cause. So if we move on, we also need to look at a few of these components in more detail, and we also need to study the physiology and the functions of the characteristics of these separate things that are all interdependent, if that makes sense. So, firstly, let's go with the synovial fluid. So most of the musculoskeletal system is not directly innervated by the circulatory system, but rather we call this the synovial fluid. So the function of the fluid is to carry the nutrients and the oxygen from the blood and bathe the tissue. So this synovial fluid has, rather than there being a direct connection with the circulatory system, you've got the fluid sort of plays the part, if that makes sense, of delivering the oxygenated blood and nutrients to much of the musculoskeletal system. The joints of the body are encased in these fluid-filled sacs, all these mucous membranes, which maintain the lubrication of the structure. So if you can imagine, if you start to get a very dried tissue state, you can imagine where we go with the inflammation of the joints and things like that. Obviously, it's highly important because the joints are constant. As you can say, because I can't just sit still for 2 seconds. Joints are constantly moving. We're constantly moving, and therefore, without this fluid, then we get constant friction within that movement, and with the friction you get bone on bone, you get wear. It becomes like an engine without oil. You get considerable pain that obviously comes from that eventually. So when we look at the tissue state of this particular area, we would not want to be seeing a highly drying tissue state. We would, and if we had got the inflammation and pain around certain joints, we'd want to be looking for that dry tissue state. So the membrane that holds the fluids in place can actually also become torn and allow for the fluids to leak. So that's a difference. That's drying for a different reason. And that's what happens. So an example would be a torn spinal disc, or a torn, forgot the word for it, area around the knee joint or something like that. And these membranes, the membranes that hold the fluid, are classically healed with golden seal. So when we talk about using golden seal for various, we've mentioned golden seal before, but golden seal is particularly good for healing the torn membrane. So when there's you can have a deficiency that is creating too much dryness in these membranes, these fluid filled membranes. But you can also have a tear and a leak in the membrane. If there's a tear and a leak in the membrane, then golden seal, but we'll come back to plants afterwards. Golden seal is particularly good. Moving on to cartilage. So this forms the connective tissue. This form of connective tissue provides the flexibility for movement of the joint, as well as structures that prevent it from moving inappropriately. So whereas the fluid filled sac lubricates and surrounds, this is actually a connective tissue that stops it moving in the incorrect way. You know, it's, do you see? Yeah, it stops it moving in the incorrect way. I could do some diagrams on PDF for this, really. Like all connective tissues, cartilage is extremely dependent upon minerals for sustaining its strength and flexibility, especially the mineral silicon, which is kind of obvious, which we find in very high amounts in two Western herbs, firstly horsetail and secondly oak grass. It's the silica which makes the cartilage hard, and it makes the cartilage strong and yet flexible. That's the key. It needs to be strong and tolerate movement at the same time. Whenever there is a weakness in the cartilage, it will often show up in other structural tissues of the body, especially the hair, the skin and the nails. So anyone who's done the, I just need to not lose my place, anyone who's done the nutritional course, and if you're in the Herbie Hub, then you can find the nutritional course in the Herbie Hub for free. So anyone who's done that will know that there is a whole deficiency in certain minerals which crops up with this hair and inability for the skin to properly heal and that kind of thing. So how we see this is slow growing hair, skin or nails, extremely brittle and slow growing, an inability for the skin to heal properly or in a good time, hair or nails that easily break, easily split, or are simply very weak. This may not simply have to do with the adequate amount of minerals in the diet, but with the body's innate capacity to properly absorb the nutrient and distribute the nutrients. So again, we we're always going to come back to the gut, and okay, somebody might have enough of that these minerals in their diet, but is the absorption correct? Is the gut able to absorb and distribute the correct minerals across the body? So we have to look at where that deficiency is coming from. Is it an absorption deficiency or is it an intake deficiency? Yep, cool. Tendons and ligaments, these two other forms of connective tissue, they are two other forms of connective tissue, in essence one and the same, the only difference being to what other types of tissue they are attached to. So tendons connect bones to muscles, whereas ligaments attach bones to bones. Okay. For all intents and purposes, they are similar to cartilage in their function. So they allow movement and flexibility and providing structure for the body. And they restrict inappropriate movements. The primary importance with the health of tendons, ligaments, as well as cartilage is that they maintain their nutrition and their lubrication. So they must be strong but flexible. It's when they become dried or malnourished, or as we talk about the atrophy, dry atrophy, that we begin to lose the tone and the stretch and the functionality of the tendons and ligaments. So they begin to either be weakened, or they just simply lose their inability to be flexible. Okay, so again, it all comes down to that atrophy, the dryness, or it comes down to, and why is the dryness, or it comes down to malnutrition. Why is, you see where we're going with all this, with this pain? Can you should start to be thinking, okay, right, bones. Okay, so bones are obviously the most solid aspect of the most dense aspect of the human organism, providing the baseline of structure from which all of the muscles, tissues, organs and systems are connected, they are protected, and they are founded within the skeletal system, the bones. So in fetal development, the bones are formed through the deposition of calcium into cartilage-based tissues. I am really simplifying this. So it's easy to think of the bones simply as a hard structure which is solid, but in fact you need to think of it with the blood vessels that they contain, that how can I say this? Yeah, start that again. It's easy to think of the bones that are simply a hard structure which is solid. But in fact, there are blood vessels which deliver nutrients and oxygens, and they also carry away waste. So we have to stop thinking of it as simply a hard structure. Healthy bones should be slightly pliable, slightly flexible, and yet hard and sturdy and strong, consisting of about 70% calcium phosphate and 30% calcium carbonate, as well as silica and a few other minerals as well, which we won't go into. The process of building bone is complex, and it requires many other cofactors, nutrients. It requires enzymes that actually carry calcium from the blood into the bones. Thus, just taking plain calcium supplements is not enough to adequately build bone. And I think that is a popular misconception probably in our modern world, when we look at a lot of reasons for the decaying bone structure, the fragility of bones, and then we just hit it with, a calcium supplement. That's not going to do it, and what you'll probably get from that is a lot of calcification and over calcification. So it's far more complex than that. So don't be thinking about bones in that very narrow way. Think a little bit more expansive. Muscles. Okay, moving on to muscles. Right, okay, there's too many muscles to talk about. So let's look at there's too many muscles to talk about. Again, we started this whole entire course with sorry about the clock. Let's keep this as simple as we possibly can without either going off track or trying to keep it so that we actually do discuss what's actually really important. There's far too many muscles to talk about, so rather than that, let's look at two primary types of muscles in the body, what we call striated or skeletal muscles and smooth muscles. So skeletal muscles are the larger muscles of the body whose function is voluntary movement. What do we mean by that? They are under our conscious control. Yep. Smooth muscles are those which line the various organs and the various tissues of the body and are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So they are outside of our control, our conscious control. You're not thinking about whether you move those muscles. It happens naturally. Yep. So an example of this would be the movement of the muscles that surround the intestinal tract. So also things like the cramping of the uterus muscles, that's the tightening and relaxing of certain internal muscles as well. Most often in the treatment of pain, we are working with skeletal muscles, but in certain situations, relaxation of the smooth muscles is important as well, especially in treating spasms. So, for example, uterus spasm, or when we're talking about the gallbladder, when we're talking about digestive intestine spasm as well. And when you're looking at treating that kind of thing, again, we go back to our antispasmodics or relaxants. Okay, that's all I want to do on these two types of muscles. I think that's all you need to be dealing with. Again, we're not doing a degree, so, you know, let's stick to what we can cover. Nerves. So, as we started with, the nervous system plays a huge interaction with the musculoskeletal system. And typically it is thought of as an entirely different system, and that is correct. However, it's important to consider the nervous system in its relationship to the musculoskeletal system, as the muscle fibers are directly innervated by the nerve fibers, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's through, what do I mean by that? So it's through the pulsation of the nerves that the muscles operate properly. Yep. So an important point to consider in regards to the nerves is that in order for them to effectively conduct their electrical signalling, there must be adequate amounts of electrolytes, minerals, throughout the synaptic cleft, so throughout the myelin sheath. So if you go back and refresh your memory with the nervous system, we talked about the myelin sheath, which is the covering of the nerve, the layer of connective tissue that surrounds the nerve fibers. So some nervous system issues can be associated with the connective tissue problems and not necessarily directly related to the nerve itself. So when we talk about holistic treatment of the musculoskeletal system, we should also take into account the nerves, and especially when we're looking at if we're looking at chronic pain and we're looking at a tension pain and spasm, and if we're looking at shooting pain, then we should especially look at the interconnectedness of the nervous system as well. And I know that's a lot to get your head around, because when you start to look at these different types of pain, then ultimately you have to then start to, you can't just look at you can't just quickly and really quickly start to look at this one particular organ system. You have to then start delving into another organ system as well. So I appreciate that's really difficult, but it's the fact. Another point worth mentioning here is the importance of the blood and its circulation in the treatment of musculoskeletal system. For stagnant or deficient blood, we can see that it can certainly be a contributing factor to, and it shouldn't be overlooked. So again, when we go back to when we've looked at either deficient, mineral deficient, nutritional deficiencies in the blood, or the stagnation of the blood, yeah, that we have to bear that in mind. And lastly, the joints themselves are where everything that we've just spoke about, the joints themselves are where all of these parts come together into a unified organism, yeah. So the joints themselves are comprised of bone, muscle, tendon, ligament, cartilage, circulation to that particular area, the nerve tissue to that particular area. So the joint itself has all of these components going on all in one place. So during the course of treatment of the joints, it's really important to consider all the parts that we've just talked about and the tissues which comprise all of those parts, where the root problem is in with all of those parts, and to administer remedies which will act upon the appropriate area of all of those parts. Difficult, very difficult. And this is why it is so short-sighted and so easy. It's the easy way out to just turn around and go, you're in pain, there's some pain meds. It's not going to cure it, because it's too complicated and we need to delve into what's actually going on. But it's the easy way out. Well, it's the easy way in, rather. Okay, what are we talking about next? Let's talk about some the 6 tissue states, and I'll try not to waffle. I'll try and condense my notes that I'm reading from. So 6 tissue states. So from an energetic perspective, pain is not simply pain. It's not simple at all energetically. There are different underlying manifestations of the pain which require different courses of treatment. I think we've established that, and therefore they will require a different remedy selection. And in our modern world, most people just, again, treat the pain with something singular. And actually, even herbal alternatives, people who think of themselves as, when we spoke at the start about people who follow a green allopathic route, so although we're think that we're thinking holistically, we're not. Typically treat pain with white willow bark or turmeric. Again, that's going to treat the symptom. It's not going to address the cause. So in regard to the plants, many people find little or no relief not because the herb isn't working, but because the herb hasn't been matched with the underlying tissue state or the pathology behind the pain. So a lot of people will say that herbal remedies not so good with treating pain. That's not the case. It's the case that often when we are in pain, pain is particularly debilitating, and therefore we reach for something quickly, whether it's medicinal or whether it's herbal. And because it's not correctly matched, because there is so much going on in the musculoskeletal system, and it affects, you're coming from all angles of other systems, then typically the pathology behind the pain, the underlying cause behind the pain, has not been addressed and matched correctly to the plant. Does that make sense? B, sit girl. No, we're not playing. There's lots to talk about. Okay, so rather than suppressing the pain with an anti-inflammatory, whether that's a drug or a plant, then what we want to do is actually correct the underlying tissue state that is causing the pain in the first place, which brings us to our tissue states. And traditional models of medicine typically classify musculoskeletal pain into 4 primary categories: those which are caused by deposits of damp, cold, heat, or dryness. Damp, cold, heat, dryness. Okay, cool. Right, I'm not going to read any of that. So let's talk about some of this. I'm just editing stuff as I go along. So heat excitation. So this tissue state is obviously very similar to inflammation, and most musculoskeletal pain symptoms are attributed to it. This lends an approach of using anti-inflammatory substances, whether that's herbal or whether it's a drug, to reduce the pain and the heat. Though, as we've said, there can be pain and even inflammation, but it can be due to different underlying causes which we must investigate. So characteristic symptoms for heat excitation will be the sensation of heat in the joint, redness to the skin. Pain feels better when we ice the pain or cool the pain. There could be swelling, there could be tenderness, there could be sharp, intense pain rather than a dull overall pain. It can be quite intense. Inflammation of the autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, or even lupus. The tongue will typically be red in colour, the pulse typically rapid, and almost boundy. This tissue state responds well to cooling remedies which contain antioxidants, bioflavonoids, chlorophyll, plant acids, and other constituents which sedate inflammation and heat. So many are in the Rosa family. So you're looking at wild cherry, bark fruit, also yarrow, hawthorn berry, Californian poppy. Yeah. Cold depression. Right, so with the depressed tissue state, we can see generalised weakness in the joints due to a lack of circulation of blood, depressed nerve function from either injury or neurological weakness, or through overall metabolic depression. So when we talked about metabolic depression as well, and cold. The central fire in the solar plexus does not, what's happening is it's not radiating out into the peripheries, and the oxygen and the nutrients that go along with that, with the overall vital force, are not, they're not reaching out. This leads to cold, stiff joints, achy muscles, that ache, that are worse with cold and damp weather. They're often better with a bit of movement. There is typically cold skin, poor circulation to the extremities, so to hands and feet, pale colours in the face as well, and a pale colour at the hands and feet. Herbs for this tissue state will typically always be warming, as you would expect, pungent, circulatory stimulants. So just a few remedies include St John's wort, ginger or wild ginger, turmeric as well, warming. You see why the inflammation for heat excitation, you really wouldn't use turmeric and ginger in that state, so it would just make things worse. What else? Prickly ash, and other pungent spices in effect. So the sun's coming around, so you've got that sort of black pepper, you've got that sort of pungent movement. Okay, let's talk about dry atrophy. So here we see the increase or the imbalance of vata. When we talk about vata, the wind, the dry atrophy into the joints, leading to coldness and dryness. The classic cold, dry, creaky feeling in the joints, where they tend to pop, so popping joints. Actually, joints which pop frequently are said to be relieving excess vata or wind from the joint. So if you've got a shoulder or an elbow that pops, it's said to be relieving the vata from the joint. This is a very important tissue state to learn to assess, as dryness will have a serious adverse impact upon the joints. No, B, sit. An adverse impact upon the joints, impairing mobility. Lost my place. Sit down, B. So impairing mobility, obviously, it's also going to increase pain. It's going to increase stiffness. Then you're going to get the withering and the loss of strength that goes along with that. Oh, B, for goodness sake, sit still. Sorry about this. Watch the nice people on the telly. Right, so you're going to get the loss of strength that goes along with that. This is most common in elderly people who are in a vata stage of life. Yeah. And therefore tend towards increasing levels of dryness systemically rather, throughout the whole entire body. So general signs and symptoms would be dry skin, and don't forget, along with dry skin, we've got the evidence of mucosal membrane dryness. So think about where the mucosal membranes are in the body, and do we have a corresponding dryness that goes along with that? For example, the respiratory system, the digestive system. So a dryness going along with the digestive system would possibly be constipation. Musculoskeletal weakness, withering and wasting of the muscles, malnutrition and wasting also, so the wasting that comes along with the lack of nutrition. Joint dryness, creaking, cracking joints. The tongue will typically be dry, and some of the best remedies will be those which you might expect would contain high levels of oil. They would contain lubricating tendencies, yeah, so that the oil is a fixed oil that promotes lubrication. It moistens the tissues. So, for example, burdock root, pleurisy root, licorice root, angelica, Solomon's seal, dragon's root, horsetail, and of course mullein as well. Okay, and let's move on to damp stagnation. So I think a good place to start here is the root of the word rheumatism comes from the Greek word for damp, and this tells us dampness and pain in the joints or the muscles would have been, you know, it's something that we would have been termed as rheumatism. But the root of it was seen to be in the fluids surrounding the musculoskeletal tissues, which is quite sensitive to changes in diet, is sensitive to changes in the weather, in the seasons, and that is something. So yeah, in where am I waffling with this? So in olden times, you would get the I can't, you know, winter's no good for my rheumatism, that sort of thing. Yeah, everyone's heard somebody say it. It's all these. That's correct. All these sensitivities of the fluids that surround the musculoskeletal tissues, all that area that we spoke about, completely and utterly sensitive, and yet it's something that modern medicine completely ignores. So we can think of this tissue state as a degree of systemic, let's think of it as systemic toxicity of metabolic waste products. Yeah. So if we go back to when we spoke about cleansing and metabolic waste, the build-up of metabolic waste and it needing to be out. And if you think about, and I'm going off track and I'm going to lose my place again. So if we think about this the metabolic waste products, rather than having the correct, let's call it an infrastructure to remove from the body, think about these being lodged in the joints. Yeah. So you've got the toxicity of these metabolic waste not leaving the body but being lodged in certain areas, yeah, which we spoke briefly about before. So if we've got this waste, this toxicity lodged in the joints, in the fluid of the joints, then that is going to trigger an inflammatory response. Okay, so many of our remedies here are actually detoxifying remedies because they help to purge these metabolic waste products from that tissue, and they open up in doing so they open up the channels of elimination for the clearing of this metabolic waste, of this toxicity. We don't want it there, we want it out. So general signs and symptoms would be pain that's worse from cold and damp weather, pain that's better when it's hot weather, overall general fatigue, sluggish sensation, so a heaviness to the pain, a feeling very heavy, feeling dull, achy, and especially after sleeping. So after sleeping and resting, still feeling very dull, achy. So when we look at fibromyalgia, for example, we tend to look at the muscular aspects of it, whereas arthritis, we tend to look at the joints. We should be looking more thoroughly at the whole there. So this real heaviness, this dullness, this real sluggish, and this achy, dull ache, heavy ache. I hope I've explained that correctly. So it's quite a difficult, damp stagnation is quite a difficult one to explain. There may be an accompanying hypothyroidism as well. There may be. A few remedies here include devil's claw, turmeric again, because it's a drying action, dandelion roots, golden seal. Okay. Sorry about the sleeping dog. Right, let's look briefly at damp relaxation. So we've just looked at damp stagnation, damp relaxation, and again, think about the connections here. Sorry about the sun. So damp relaxation, so in the lax tissue state, an excess amount of fluids that are leaving the body or travelling and residing in inappropriate places of the body. So they're travelling along, they're not moving as quickly as they should, the fluids are not getting to where they should, and they're creating this relaxed state. It's too damp, but it's also too relaxed as well. In regards to the musculoskeletal system, this can lead to calcium being leached from the bones, is really quite important, and being flushed out into the kidneys, so leading to the demineralization of the bones, but also which is then you're going down the osteoporosis route, or at least a very weakened bone state. There's also the excess of minerals being circulated from the bones, could also make one or more of the mineral deposits in the joints being accumulated elsewhere. So what I'm trying to say, so for example, it's not what it's being leached from the bone, and it could create kidney stones, for example. Yeah. So so it's different to the stagnation. The stagnation is the accumulation around the joints, and it's not being, the toxicity is not being flushed away. This is the relaxation, damp relaxation, is it's being flushed into all the wrong places and all the wrong times, and also it's leaching from the bone as well and being deposited elsewhere and affecting other things. So it's not good. We've also got laxity, this relaxed sensation, sensation is also, it indicates a lack of tone. Remember when we talked about the relaxed, you know, what is it relaxed? It's when we talk about the tissue state, it has no tone. I really am not going to be able to do this if the sun gets a lot brighter. Right, okay. So the lack of tone impacts the connective tissue, making them overly flexible. So able to stretch too far. So thus how is that a problem? It's a problem because it puts strain on the joints, because it can overly stretch, overextends. And because this tissue state has a very potent impact on venous circulation, so we can be going down the route of ulceration in the legs. So the passive venous congestion can often go along with it. So again, we've got, think of it, try and get it in your head. You've got this movement of fluid, but it's all too relaxed. So what are you going to get in this? You've got this this movement that's in, especially in the passive movements, so not the artery, the passive, the venous congestion can often go along with, you've got there's no movement there, there's no flow, so you can get the ulceration in the legs as well. The primary remedies used in this particular tissue state are oak bark, royal fern, sumac. I've been waiting for sumac to come up. Sumac is incredibly useful, and also sage as well. Sit still. Well, you're gonna have to put up with me being blinded because I can't move anymore. Okay, so I think this is our last one. We've got wind tension. So the tissue state is especially important and relatively easy to determine. Thank goodness, because the others really aren't. It's essentially associated with spasm in the muscles. Think about it. It's too much wind and it's tension. It's like tension. Yeah, spasm in the muscles. We get that. Often where they become overly contracted or twisted or unable to fully relax. So this can lead to sharp pains. That's what you would expect, right? Especially if the nerves are involved as well, especially on movement. So you move, there is a sharp pain. So for example, when we've got a trapped nerve and that the associated area around that, the symptoms can either be chronic or just like we would expect with the wind status, that wind tension, we would expect it to come and go. So again, they can be sporadic with no, seemingly they might have no pattern at all. Generally the symptoms are worse from cold, and they respond well to heat and warmth, which allows the muscles then, what do we get when we do that? It allows the muscle then to relax. There can be poor local circulation, and this stagnant blood from the arterial constriction. So let me just put the dog down for a minute. So when we no wait, please lie down on your chair. Wait, you're making me very hot. I'm cooking. Wait, I am not in a state of wind tension at the moment. Babe, shh, shh, shh. I know, it's very disappointing that we're working and it's sunny. I get it. These nice people need to know about this. Wait. Don't tell me no one will watch it. They're watching. No, wait. Right, sorry. I'm absolutely melting. Okay, so what was I just talking about? So there can be a poor circulation in that area as well. From that we can expect maybe we've got stagnant blood situation, maybe we've got a constriction as well. So all that is something to bear in mind. There can be the pulse will often feel tense, hard, it'll feel wiry, the tongue might shake or vibrate upon leaving the mouth. First and foremost, the most important remedy here would be magnesium. Good old magnesium, back to magnesium again, which most people are incredibly deficient in. We spoke about this. If you haven't, I'm going to say it again, if you haven't done the nutritional thing, it's free in the Herbie Hub, please go do it. Magnesium, incredibly important, and is responsible for, magnesium is responsible for muscular relaxation. So again, key mineral to be observant of. So before you move on to, if you have assessed a wind tension tissue state in your client who is presenting with a certain aspect of pain, then you would start with magnesium before you even think about any herbs. Yeah. Primary category of herbs here would be relaxants, also nervine, sedatives and hypnotics as well. Great antispasmodics here are lobelia, one of the top ones at the top there. Also black coash, cramp bark, valerian as well, hops right in there as well. What else have we got? We've also got bone set, teasel. Teasel, I don't think we spoke about teasel much. Also wild lettuce as well. But wild lettuce you'd lose in using really low doses. So maybe forget I've said that. Right, okay. So there's our tissue states. Cool. I'm cooking because suddenly it's like we've got the sun bursting through the window. It was really cloudy when I started. I set all the room up. For goodness sake, this will be fine. Don't worry about it. You're not going to be blinded by the sun and hide in a corner with your notes. It's not going to happen. Right. So let's look at some, what else do we need to cover? We need to cover some evaluation, I think. So central to our evaluation criteria when we're actually looking at our clients for a musculoskeletal system defect, for want of a better word, we want to determine the underlying energetic pattern. So we want to be looking at those 6 tissue states that we've just looked at. Many of the tissue states often manifest together. Not saying it's easy, I never said it was going to be easy. The most important of these indications is to determine whether the tissues have an excess of moisture or an excess of dryness. That's one of the most important things, because that's going to lead to radically opposed therapeutics that you use. So you have to, that's one of the most important things to determine. Is this client suffering because we have an excess of moisture or an excess of dryness? Okay, so there's no, when we've talked about before, we've talked about pulse and tongue indications when we're going through certain systems and we're going through evaluation criteria. Here I'm going to say that when we go through our interview skills, the most important thing is knowing the onset of the pain, along with the dietary lifestyle and the lifestyle factors that may contribute to the underlying cause. Leaky gut syndrome and potential food intolerances absolutely must be addressed. Now, okay, so I can't state this clearly enough, the importance of it. You as a herbalist, as a holistic therapist, as whatever you do in your natural practice, because you're obviously practicing naturally, you can't overlook leaky gut and food intolerance. It's up there right at the top. It's got to be addressed. If you start offering other medication plants and you have not looked into that, you haven't got it here to look at, then you are doing your client a disservice, and you're skipping a fundamental key point of a lot of our medical health issues. You just can't overlook it. You have to address that first. And they're of that food intolerance, food sensitivity, or leaky gut syndrome are at the root of a lot of systemic inflammation problems. So especially those that have got an autoimmune component. So it really is, it's vital. You can't just choose not to do it. You have to address it. And lastly, one of the most vitally important components of your evaluation criteria in regards to the treatment of pain is to take a symptom score as well. So you need to have written down your notes and the severity of the pain, the frequency of the pain, the timing of the pain as well. And you need to be able to track your results, because people forget. So that's your job, not theirs. It's your job to get that information from your client and to monitor that information from your client on a regular basis, so that you can monitor the effectiveness of your treatment. Your client is in pain. They are not going to remember stuff, and if they have a bad day here or then the pain can seem worse. You really need to be able to analyze it correctly and record it however you do that. Also, you need to note the impact upon their sleep, and you need to note whether there is any fluctuation in that, because we all know, because we've done all the other sessions, we know how important good quality sleep and rest is. So you need to, pain is a major impact factor upon sleep and rest. So therefore you have to monitor that as well. You need to be able to, you need to devise a way of scoring that. I know a lot of people will frown at it, but I'm sorry, but you need to do it. It's important. What else do we want to cover? Right, let's look a little bit at the energetic system. So a little bit from an astrological perspective, we can see that the musculoskeletal system has a few primary rulers that are important to take into consideration. So first and foremost of these is Saturn, as you would expect, who rules all of the structural components of the body, connective tissues, tendons, ligaments, cartilage, bones, as well as the joints themselves as well. These are all ruled by Saturn, as well as Capricorn, the 10th sign, and who is also ruled by Saturn. So the sign of Capricorn specifically relates to the knees. The knees relating to the past, but we won't go into that. It's a whole different course. But as his ruling planet is Saturn, he takes governance of the bones and the skeletal system as a whole, so not stopping at the knees. As the 10th sign, the 10th house becomes an important area of the chart to consider as well. So it's important to remember that the joints themselves are also ruled by Saturn and Capricorn as the hard structural materials, but the fluids and the moisture within the joints are ruled by the opposing sign of Cancer. Yeah. So this is similar to how the teeth are ruled by Saturn and Capricorn, but the gums and the mucosa of the mouth itself are ruled by the Moon and Cancer. I think that's obvious. The muscles themselves are ruled principally by Mars, and inflammation as a whole is ruled by Mars. Again, I think it's quite obvious. So we have Saturn and Mars being our primary planetary rulers of the bones and the muscles, as well as the pain, inflammation and the discomfort often associated with musculoskeletal issues. So according to according to our astrological aspects, and I'm going to just throw this in here. I've offered this before, the astrological course of herbalism. If you're interested, if you're watching this and you're interested in that, I've not put it forward because there wasn't quite enough interest in it, but if you are interested, then please do drop me a message and I'm willing to get that going. I don't want to go into it. I'll go off on a tangent. I don't want to go into it too much here, because again, it goes off on its own thing, and yet it is connected, and I just can't stop. So I'm going to stop right there. I want to stop there on that. You want to know more about the astrology of plants? Let me know. We'll do it. Okay. Okay. So let's look also, but you see how that works. You see how that is like, yeah. Cool. Right. So let's look at some primary herbal actions. Antispasmodics. So this is likely one of our most specific actions for the musculoskeletal system. For they operate either directly upon the muscular tissue themselves, or indirectly via the nerve intervention to the muscle. So the nerve going to the muscle. So it's operating directly on it or in a stealth mode, in effect. So many cases of pain in the musculoskeletal system can be broken down into either tension or spasm, or inflammation. Of course, we've established there's all the different reasons underneath that, but we've got at the root at the top, we've got the inflammation, tension or spasm. Tension and spasm is strictly under the wing tension tissue state and is principally treated with antispasmodics. Antispasmodics again can be put into a few different categories as well, as we spoke about before. So primarily those are nervine sedatives or hypnotics, and then antispasmodics, which are not those. So here we've got some good antispasmodics, which are not necessarily strong hypnotic, although some of them might settle the nerves a little as well. So you've got lobelia, you've got cramp bark, and then we've got antispasmodics that will have a strong nervine action. So valerian, hops. You've also got the wild lettuce again there, and you've got black coash, you've got Jamaican dogwood. So before you use any of those remedies, you should always be advising the use of magnesium. So before we go to use any of these, the first thing we do is we want to make sure that our client is not deficient in magnesium, because magnesium, increasing the magnesium, ideally up to 600 milligrams a day in a divided dose, not in one go. You'll have someone sat on the toilet forever. So in a divided dose throughout the day, increasing the magnesium is instantly going to help. Then you look at all these. As well as that, as antispasmodic, you've got your category of anodyne or analgesic. These are great. We've got birds flying at the windows now. Brilliant. Why not? It's not at all distracting. These words are often used interchangeably to describe a plant that will facilitate in the relief of pain. Pain, as we know, as we've discussed, is a very broad term. People can experience pain in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons. We know this: inflammation, cramping, spasm, swelling, dampness, cold, heat, dryness, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, our anodyne or analgesic materia medica is relatively broad due to numerous other actions each individual plant may have. So we have to keep that in mind. Don't just willy-nilly chuck these all over the place. So ginger is an analgesic because it brings warmth and circulation to the local tissue, and the oil has some numbing properties, whereas willow bark is an analgesic because it is bitter, it is cooling, and it drains accumulated fluids from the tissues, as well as a tiny amount of inflammation modulating constituents, so it can regulate inflammation as well, just a tiny amount. Other herbs are analgesic because they are antispasmodic, and others because they are inflammation modulating, and others because they are sedatives to the nerves. So when we're treating pain, it's good to determine what the underlying cause of the pain is, whether it's damp or dry or cold. It's more important than ever, because if we use one of these in the incorrect way, we're just going to make the pain worse, and you will be seen as a very, very bad herbalist. So some of our most common anodynes in Western materia medica include Californian poppy, Jamaican dogwood, wild lettuce, valerian, meadowsweet, willow bark, black coash, and also kava as well. Okay. Circulatory stimulants. So these are extremely important in musculoskeletal conditions marked by coldness, dampness, obviously, because we are stimulating circulation. Yeah. So by opening up the flow of blood throughout the system, the tissues are bathed in fresh, oxygenated, and nutritionally rich blood, and any accumulated waste products or stagnation that has been collected in the tissues are then flushed out and carried to the appropriate channel of elimination. So we're doing a two-pronged thing here. Many of our circulatory stimulants are also pungent digestive stimulants as well, because that's where all the movement comes in, which assist in strengthening the digestive fires. So highly important consideration, especially for chronic musculoskeletal conditions. Again, we're looking at that digestive impact as well. So a few reliable circulatory stimulants are cayenne, rosemary, celery seed, prickly ash, ginger, and angelica. Okay, diuretic. So the diuretic action can prove to be extremely beneficial for certain musculoskeletal issues, primarily due to the accumulation of dampness in the tissue, metabolic waste products, and mineral deposits that are in the wrong place. So by flushing out, think of it as a flushing out the tissues and the kidneys, the body is able to remove the inflammation, which is the trigger behind the pain. So chronic inflammation also tends to produce that hefty amount of metabolic waste, which can further congest and can stagnate the blood and the tissues. So of course there are many diuretics in our materia medica, but there are a few with specific applications to musculoskeletal pain and have the secondary action, which are uniquely supportive as well. So a few remedies here would be celery seed, yarrow. So yarrow has that secondary supportive action of cleansing the blood. It's the master of the blood, yeah. Celery seed, yarrow, bone sets, dandelion leaf, that cleansing, yeah. Nettle, of course, and horsetail. Okay. So let's look at another one for a second. A rubificient or counter irritant, so also known as counter irritant. So this is a topical application of plants. So often through the use of an ointment, or just even using the fresh powdered herb to the affected area. And they work through stimulating local circulation, bringing fresh blood supply and oxygen and nutrients, as the ability to carry away that metabolic waste products. So by, let's say here, by applying it to here, it increases the blood flow to there, to such a, topically increases the blood flow to that area by such a degree that the blood flow then takes away, helps to relieve the metabolic waste that's in that area. So in this way, a counter irritant or rubificient actually equally detoxifies and decongests the local tissue and brings nourishment for optimal function. Because it's a topical application, they only work on the local tissue states. So it's only ever going to work to where you apply it, and it's only ever going to have, depending on the herb that you're using, it only has a short-term effect. So rather than the cause, you would be offering, I feel that you would probably be offering this as a short-term relief whilst you prepared to treat your clients in a more long-term, with a more long-term solution. Yeah. So one of the most classic herbs here is fresh nettle. Of course, this treatment can only be applied in the springtime when the fresh leaves are available. Otherwise, these remedies are typically, apart from nettle, the remedies are typically pungent. They are circulatory stimulants with some analgesic properties. So what are we looking at? We're looking at cayenne again. We're looking at horseradish. We're looking at wintergreen. You have to be careful with the wintergreen. You've got a lot of guidance in the UK that has been updated recently. So look at some of your guidance, please, in your big book, which I know that you all went out and bought. The nice big hefty book on contraindications. If you're going to practice and you're serious, you need your book of contraindications. Please get it. That is your monetary investment into working as a herbalist. You can't expect to have no investments. It's not how energy works. So wintergreen, excellent, and yet has some precautionary measures attached to it. Peppermint essential oil, brilliant. Mustard seed, rosemary essential oil, and ginger. Big note here, people with sensitive skin should test these remedies on a small area first before applying it all over and getting a real extra problem to deal with, which is an irritated skin. So again, short term. You're applying topically, you're applying to the actual area. You know, that's a short-term relief for your client. Let's look at some nervines. So nervines here have a broad range of support for the musculoskeletal system. And for general pain symptoms, as we have seen before, the entire musculoskeletal system is directly affected by, for want of a better word, the neural tissue. So the nerve interaction between the nerve and the nervous system coming into the musculoskeletal tissue. It's that direct interaction. So it makes the nervine category intrinsically linked in a lot of ways. A majority of the materia medica acting upon the nervous system in a sedative fashion is also directly antispasmodic for the skeletal and the smooth muscles as well. So when we spoke about skeletal muscle or the smooth muscles, the muscles that you are in charge of and the muscles that just do their shit because you don't know that they're working, you just hope that they're working. So it has that direct connection there. They are especially useful in chronic pain conditions where the level of the pain levels are to the extent of the client losing sleep. So again, we're coming back to that losing of sleep, and they're developing a certain degree of anxiety that goes along with. So if you go back to when we lose sleep, what can we expect the outcome of that to be? So if you go back to analysing that, if you've got a client who's in so much pain that they're losing that sleep, then you need to look at the degree of anxiety that is related to that. You need to look at the frustration and the stress that is associated with it, because there will be some. They are obviously specifically indicated in pain directly associated with the nerves, such as for example, sciatica. There you go. Or a pinched nerve. So recently I just lay funny. I had a pinched nerve in my neck there, but it was really quite debilitating. Strong nervines are also beneficial in pain management, in that they can help the client to a certain degree distance themselves. So what's happening is that the distance your conscious awareness away from the pain, so that they are better able to function in their daily life. This is one of the ways that, let me just mark my position. This is one of the ways that cannabis tincture works particularly well. So cannabinoids that are extracted into alcohol the same way that you would extract any other tincture. It's not about getting high. It's about the cannabinoids. Again, if you've got a copy of Good Measure of Nothing, then you need to read this section. I can't remember what chapter it is, but there's a whole chapter on the research of this. So what would happen here particularly works, again, when the pain is related to the nervous interaction, the interaction of the nervous system. So it distances the conscious awareness of the pain. So the pain's still there, however, you're up here somewhere. Again, it's not about having a high, so you would use the tincture in the way that you would use 4 drops underneath the tongue and allow it to access the nervous system in that way. It's the quickest way into the body, and it provides a distance from the pain, so you're able to function beyond the pain. It's the best way I can explain it, really. If you've used it, you'll know. And again, not everything works with everyone, because what are we doing here? We're establishing a short-term solution whilst we look at long-term solutions and causes. So you're establishing, when we're working with this kind of in this degree, we're establishing as a short-term solution. So sometimes simply by inducing a hypnotic or mildly narcotic state, a strong nervine can help someone to manage their pain while the underlying root of the root cause of the pain can be addressed. Yeah, so again, I mean, with you know, anyone who comes to you is poorly has got, obviously they're in discomfort, but when we're talking about severe pain, we want to try and, you're obviously going to want to try and give some relief instantly. So our stronger nervine materia medica in this regard would be valerian, it would be hops, we would be looking at passion flower as well, kava. Two other remedies would be extremely important for nerve specific pain are St John's wort, and actually St John's wort, long term when I had sciatica, St John's wort I found to be incredibly useful, and also prickly ash as well. Okay, so let's look at nutritive tonics. These would be our mineral-rich remedies which can facilitate in rebuilding weakened connective tissue. So at the start when we talked about that weakened connective tissue, the nutritive tonic is where what comes in here. So if we've established a weakened connective tissue, weakened bones and other structural elements of the body that are weakened, now, what's important here is to remember that they, of course, they can't replace an adequate nutrient-dense diet. So if you've got somebody who's living on a McDonald's, giving them something that's giving them some comfrey is not going to counteract that. And again, you need to do the nutrients course. And this is why they go hand in hand, because you need to be able to establish if your client is nutrient deficient. That is really, really important. So an adequate nutrient-rich diet should be number 1 point, yeah. And also, if you've got also if you're going to use a nutritive tonic, then you need to know. Well, you tell me, what do you need to know? Think about it for a second. Got it? You need to know that your client not only already has a nutrient-rich diet, because you don't want any anti-nutrient. An anti-nutrient is a meal that you eat that takes nutrient from the body rather than gives any back. So it's robbing the nutrient bank, yeah? Again, do the nutrition course. So not only that, what else do you need to know? You need to know that your client's digestive system is going to be able to absorb the nutritive tonic. Otherwise, you're giving a nutritive tonic that's not going anywhere. It's not going to do any good at all. And that's really pointless. So you need to be either using it in a conjunction with an appropriate digestive preparation to enhance the absorption of the nutrients in the gut, or you need to be fairly confident that actually your client, you're aware that your client is is able to absorb these nutrients. And what you should be picking up on there instantly is if you have established that you have nutrient deficient connective tissues, bones or other structural elements in the body, but you're in a position to turn around and think, okay, client's got a good diet, yeah, they're going to be able to absorb it, I'm not concerned about their guts, they're absorbing the absorption of nutrients in the gut, then how did they get nutrient deficiency in the first place? So if you've established that you've got nutrient deficiency, a weakened connective tissue from nutrient deficiency, then surely your client has a nutrient deficient diet and the absorption of the nutrients in the gut is impaired in some way. So I'd argue that if you're working with nutritive tonics, you are also going to need to work with a preparation, a digestive preparation. So you're going to need to work with that as well as, because I don't see any, I think you'd be overlooking something if you just prescribed, there's that word again, a nutritive tonic. I don't think you could actually do that. Right, with that in mind, our nutrient dense herbs include, where would you go with this? Of course, everyone's going to know this: nettle leaf, horsetail, comfrey, dandelion leaf, alfalfa, kelp, sea vegetables, other sea vegetables, bone broth, right up there. Okay, so we spoke about bone broth before, and I know it's technically it's not a herb, it's an animal-based medicine food, but it is one of the most nutrient-dense superfoods for rebuilding bones, teeth, connective tissues, and other structural components of the body. So from a dietary perspective, you cannot overlook it. You also want dietary, you want to be looking at nutrient dense soups, broths, stews, animal protein. Lamb is the best for this. I know everyone's going to go, but still it is. Dark leafy green vegetables, kales, mushrooms, sea vegetables, and digestive stimulant herbs here are a must. So you want to be repairing that gut lining. You want to know that if you give your client a nutrient tonic, that it will be absorbed. You need to know that, otherwise you are wasting your time, you are wasting your client's time, and they're poorly, and you are also disrespecting the energy of the plant. There we go. Three-pronged. Okay, so let's move on to astringents. This category of plants are going to be best used whenever there is an indication of relaxed tissue states. So astringent, yeah, too relaxed. So they are most definitely contraindicated whenever there is overtoning. That's not even a word. Okay, so yeah, try and get where I'm coming from. So if the tissue state is too tight and dry, yeah, don't, for the love of God, give any of these. Yeah, because major contraindication. So if we have spasm and cramping due to an overly tight, dry, toned tissue state, and then we give the astringent, which is gonna make it yeah, you've just created a real problem, which is this is the whole reason why you can't just go on a course and make some tinctures and call yourself a herbalist. I'm sorry, but you can't do it. Don't be giving me that shit. It doesn't work. So, right. No B, no B, no. Down. Relax, B. Relax. No, I'm not picking you up. I can't read when you're on my lap. I can't read. So, connective tissue that have been overly stretched, strained, in that circumstance, a good astringent can help to tighten those tissue states back up to their proper tone. So when it's overly relaxed, you're going to fall off that chair and you'll be overly bloody relaxed. B, for goodness sake. Okay. where am I? Sorry about this. This is not how to do your herbal practice, people. Don't get your dog involved. So a good astringent for an overly relaxed tissue state or connective tissue, a good astringent is going to bring that tone back to where it should be. So they're also beneficial for pain associated with prolapsed tissue or prolapsed organs. So our best astringent is oak bark, but also willow, sumac, horsetail and sage and nettle could work as well. Here we do have an astringent quality. Again, the main thing you need to be aware of there is this is where your tissue state is all important, because you've got a major contraindication. Right, let's look at the category of alternatives. So this category of herbs is especially useful for people with arthritic pain, due to damp accumulation, due to leaky gut, that leaky gut pathology, so liver stagnation and generalised bad blood. When we talked about back in history, everyone called it bad blood. So by draining and drying the damp accumulation, cleansing the bloodstream and getting the liver moving, we can correct the underlying cause of pain. So standard alternatives can be applicable here, such as dandelion, such as nettle, such as burdock and organ grape. So all the standard alternatives there. I do get, again, we're going back to the pathology of liver stagnation and leaky guts and damp accumulation. So nothing's moving correctly. And that's where the damp accumulation is around the joints. And it really, really knocks me that one of the main questions I'm asked, it doesn't bloody matter where I am, everything, oh, can you give me for arthritis? Well, do you know what? It's not as simple as what can you just give me to... Do you think, seriously, do they honestly think that throughout history, if there was one thing that we wouldn't all be talking about, that one thing, you need to look at what is the situation with your diet. Well, how have you got into a state of liver stagnation, of leaky gut pathology? So again, go back to digestion and look at what leaky gut is, and look at what we talk about in that, and think about your arthritic pain, your client with arthritic pain. Okay, we can go topical and we can go short-term relief, but there has to be a lifestyle change here. There has to be a lifestyle change. There has to be an increase of drainage of this of the excessive waste, of this damp accumulation. We want to be moving the bloodstream through the liver. We want to be cleansing, and we want to be actually, getting things flowing again. And we need to look at why that has occurred. So it's not one word. It's not a one-word answer. Remember that. You know what? And if you start to practice, you will get sick and tired of the arthritis question. Arthritis. What can I do for arthritis? What can I do for arthritis? It's just constant all the time. Okay. Rant over. There's going to be one there somewhere, wasn't there? So anti-inflammatory, let's look at this category, anti-inflammatory. So this is another one of those very general herbal actions that we don't like general herbal actions, do we? We all know that by now. So it's got a wide range of plants. It's not a very good term because anti-inflammatory, it's better to say we moderate inflammation, because we don't want to be anti-inflammatory. Inflammatory is good in certain circumstances. The body knows what it's doing. So you don't need me to say all this. you know this. If you don't know this by now, then you need to start back at the beginning and do it all again. So in regards to the musculoskeletal system, inflammation is a peripheral response to something deeper that is occurring. So whether it's an injury, whether it is overuse, whether it's a response to food or an allergy or an intolerance or a sensitivity, the inflammation is a peripheral response. It is a skeletal response to something else that's going on. Yep. Again, injury, overuse, or a response to food. Okay. So it's important to know that herbs alone will not take away someone's inflammation. I'm going to say that again. Herbs alone will not take away someone's inflammation. It has to be approached from a holistic point. It has to be looked at with an adjustment to lifestyle. Why have you got an injury or overuse? Why have we got a response to food? What is our diet? So it has to be a holistic point where we look at proper diet, we look at lifestyle adjustments, we look at therapies such as hydrotherapy or massage or chiropractics, we look at body work, we also look, even sometimes we need surgery. Again, this is working within the parameters of knowing your parameter. Yeah. Not giving someone a lethal leaf and tell them it's going to cure every ailment they've got. I've heard that one before. So also, plants are typically inflammation modulating due to different reasons. We know all this. You don't need me to keep bashing you over the head with this. So both energetically and chemically, some are warming, others are cooling, some contain essential oils, others contain resins and silicons and steroidal components as well. Most plants will also have their own unique affinity. We've talked about unique affinities for different organ systems, so secondary actions and uses. With that information in mind about each single plant, you select an appropriate inflammation modulating herb or herbs or formula to add a broad spectrum pain formula. So you would add, based on everything that you know, you would add the inflammation modulating, inflammation regulating herb to your pain spectrum formula. Cool. So let's go through a few things that I've got a little bit of a connection with treatment of musculoskeletal system and have displayed inflammation properties that work well. And I'm going to hang that there with the however, bear in mind everything we've just said. Okay, so turmeric, yarrow, angelica, willow, meadowsweets, birch as well. Devil's claw, black coash, licorice root and wild yam. You must keep in mind your specific indications. You must keep in mind your tissue states. You must keep in mind that we're not turning off inflammation. We need to look at the cause, and you must keep in mind how all these modulating, for want of a better word, anti-inflammatories work in connection with the formulation that you're putting together. Don't be overwhelmed by it. I know it all sounds like oh, for God's sake, I can't possibly do any of this. No, get yourself a great big, go to Hobbycraft and get or the works and get a great big A3 layout pad and just jot things down. Yeah, remember how we got well, I did you a sheet for formulations, but do you know what? I just jot it down on a big pad so you can put it up there and really just analyze it and look at it. Okay, if I am working with I need an anti-inflammatory because I know I've got this damp this damp stagnation. However, I'm looking at the person's constitution. I'm looking at the fact that it's affecting their sleep and it's affecting something else, and I need a nerve component in here because it's related to X, Y, Z. If you jot it all down, you will be able to think, do you know what? I know what I need here. I'm going to put in licorice roots, or I'm going to put in sumac, or I'm going to I'm going to use I'm okay with the fact that turmeric is warming because I've got a cooling herb in there, or do you see? Just plop it in bubbles and then move to your sheet. So don't be overwhelmed by it. It's just about jotting it down and analysing it. And also sit with your plant as well. And we were going to do some plant sitting. If anyone's interested in that, I'll talk about this more. Okay, moving on. Next category, we've got emollients or demulcents. And this is our last category because the dog's very heavy. So typically these actions are looked at synonymously, but they are actually different. So the first difference is that often people say demulcent in an internal use and emollient is a topical use. But you have to go on there. You're like holding a jacket potato, for goodness sake. I'm absolutely boiling. You're like a great big hog roast. Sorry, let me get out of the sun. Right, so typically we think of the demulcent as an internal use and we think of the emollient as an external use. Another level of it is that demulcent is moistening and soothing to dryness, whereas an emollient is softening. So there's moistening and softening. It's different kind of action. So the softening action means that no, sit down. No, I'm sorry to be firm, but no, it's not love time. It's mommy work time. Goodness sake, wait. I know I'm talking. I'm not talking to you. Wait. This is so stressful. Kids and dogs. Don't work with kids and dogs. Right. Emollient is a softening action, meaning that it helps to smooth out hardness and roughness in the tissue. Okay, so that all being said, more often than not, something that is demulcent is also an emollient and vice versa. And I think we've covered this, but I'm saying it again. So these actions are quite beneficial for the musculoskeletal system, particularly when there is an underlying dry atrophy tissue state. So a wasting of the tissue, a stiffness and a tension and a lack of lubrication, lack of moisture in the joints. So the skin and the mucosal membranes have all got a lack of moisture. And of course, our general demulcent is slippery elm, which you'll be lucky if you can get. Marshmallow, good for generalized dry atrophy. But there are other remedies as well, which have got a more specific indication to joints. So here we've got pleurisy root, we've got mullein as well, Solomon's seal as well. Again, debatable on what you can get. We've also got dragon roots, which is also known as false Solomon's seal. Now, I've never worked with that at all. Burdock, and we've got licorice as well. Okay, so you've got quite a few there to consider in that dry atrophy state. Seriously, we're going to start throwing things at mommy now. You like the entertainment, you really are. Okay, so common symptoms. Let's move on to some common symptoms. Where are we? Oh, good Lord. Okay. Common symptoms. So apart from injuries and a majority of symptoms and issues are associated with these categories. So rheumatic diseases, of which there are over 100. Generally speaking, there are common symptoms such as pain, stiffness, swelling in the joints, muscles, bones, connective tissues of the body, leading to decreased mobility. It's important here to differentiate the term arthritis, which is often used relatively loosely, as we've just established. Arthritis is specifically inflammation of the joints and is just one type of rheumatic disease. Okay, I think the dog wants to go out. Okay. Right, let's continue without the presence of a dog. Okay, so let's talk about some common symptoms with us. I think that's where we were. Oh, who knows? Right, injuries. So sprains, strains. Likely that most common reasons for musculoskeletal pain are sprains and strains. Old or new injuries can very well be treated through the use of herbs and a few homeopathic directions with great effect. So either by strengthening damaged tissue or relieving stagnant blood or resetting bones and the like. So to define a few terms, a strain is simply when a muscle is overextended or pulled, whereas a sprain involves the tearing of muscle fibres or the blood vessels. Hence, a sprain is considered a more serious injury than a strain. These two common forms of injury are treated quite well simply with arnica and or yarrow as well. And these two plants help to relieve stagnant blood and bruising and the accompanying of pain that goes along with that. Right, let's look at something else. Fibromyalgia. This disease is associated with chronic long-standing pain in the skeletal muscles of the body. The old doctors loosely called it rheumatism. In our modern day, the root of fibromyalgia is linked with leaky gut syndrome and food intolerance. Thus, healing the gut lining and removal of food allergens becomes a primary focus of the treatment, along with relieving discomfort and pain as much as possible. From an Ayurvedic perspective, fibromyalgia is said to be a disease of cold, tension, and dryness or vata, which has become lodged within the joints and the muscles. It is typically considered difficult to treat without the underlying gut restoration protocols and cannot easily be relieved by simple anti-inflammatories, drugs, whether that's drugs or plants. So lifestyle adjustment is key. It becomes a prominent importance, along with regulation of energy expenditure and not pushing physical limits too far. A single day of overexertion, which could be something really simple like walking to the car, can put someone in bed for days due to exceeding heightened inflammation response. So if you think of the inflammation response as having a limit, and that exceeding that limit can vary. One time a walking across the garden can be it, another time walking down the high street can be it, so it can vary. It's worth noting that there may be a link between fibromyalgia and hypothyroidism. There may be, which can lead to excessive humours. So what we're talking about is the excessive deposits in the joints and muscles. It's worth noting that. Osteoporosis, this is generalized weakness and demineralization of the bones. Typically occurs in the elderly and can be associated with menopausal women with lower estrogen levels. Estrogen keeps the bones stronger. Bones can become weakened due to a number of reasons though. One is simply constitutional weakness. Another could be poor digestive functions and absorption of minerals into the tissue. So if we've got that, the absorption of minerals and nutrition is impaired, then it's can impact the strength of the bones. There may be chronic inflammation, hormonal or pH imbalances, which leads to the leaching of the calcium from the bones. Yeah. So we've also got lifestyle factors can certainly contribute as well, such as little or to no weight bearing exercises, poor diets with a lack of protein and minerals, leaky gut syndrome again, because we've got that inability to absorb minerals and nutrition because we're leaking out. We've also got antibiotic or other prescription drug usage, which we've got the side effects of. We've got endocrine imbalances. So a generalized support for osteoporosis or simply malnourished bones includes remedies which correct gut health, number one, digestion and absorption of nutrients, nutritive tonic herbs, which are mineral rich, primarily nettle leaf, horsetail, oat grass, mineral supplements of not only calcium but again, as we said earlier, magnesium and other factors. So vitamin K2, for example, they're all extremely important. The supplement of bone, there's a supplement called Bone Up or something like that, which is and there's various things that have got actual combined mineral nutrients in that can be used. All right, moving on to broken bones. Injuries to the extent of broken bones often go beyond the scope of herbalism and into other therapies such as, well, we don't need to talk about that, modern medicine. Yet there are a few remedies which are extremely beneficial in helping bones to reset into their proper place and facilitate the healing process in general. The main remedies here include bone set, believe it or not, though this remedy is disputed amongst herbalists as to whether it really does work in this way. If we observe Native American uses, it was indeed the main remedy use for this. But one I want to throw in there as well is comfrey. Comfrey is the primary European herb used to heal the bones, though it can lead to overgrowth and seal the bone back in an incorrect place. Okay, so I've got personal experience of using comfrey. So after one of the herbal sessions, I had an incident with Merlin the pony and I got kicked and it broke my finger. Now at the time I didn't know it was broken, I just knew that it bloody well hurt a lot. I wasn't going to be trundling off to a hospital and waiting hours at A&E for the finger. So I gave it a few weeks thinking, oh, it's just an injury, it's not broken. And then a few weeks later, after excruciating pain and inability to move it, I realised that it was broken. And I put a splint on it, but I also used comfrey around the finger within the splint, and I don't know if you can tell now actually, but I didn't set it correctly and the comfrey really worked. It worked really, really well. So that's the normal finger action, and that finger just, you can see, just won't bend the same because it's just set incorrectly, and it has a very big lump there, and it still does hurt quite a lot. It's set, but not set. It's set too well, too fast, incorrectly. So comfrey really works. It really does work. I'm not saying if you break your leg, you know, your child breaks its leg, don't bother taking it to the hospital. Wrap some comfrey leaves around it. Please don't go to the hospital. But, you know, just wanted to put that in there. Arthritis, here we go. So as mentioned previously, arthritis literally means inflammation of the joints. There are two primary manifestations of arthritis, the first being osteoarthritis and the second being rheumatoid arthritis. Osteoarthritis, also called degenerative joint disease, is the most common form of arthritis which affects millions of people. This is a gradual decay and wearing down of the cartilage in the joints, decreasing the cushioning. Yeah. I've lost it. Decreasing the cushioning in the joints. So rheumatoid arthritis, on the other hand, is a degenerative autoimmune disease where the immune system literally is attacking the joints and the structural tissue of the body, primarily the connective tissue. This leads to chronic pain, the joints, difficulty with movement, swelling, inflammation, and eventually malformation of the joints to the point of becoming crippled. Yeah, the malformation and extreme swelling often occurs in the fingers. It often manifests symmetrically in the body, both hands or both feet or both elbows being the same. Like many autoimmune conditions, its root could be seen as in the gut, with the lining being overly permeable or leaky, with the presence of systemic inflammation due to chronic ingestion of an intolerant or an allergic food. According to, if we look at some of the work of Matthew Wood, the roots of autoimmune diseases generally can be seen to be associated in the gut. I mean, do read some of his work on autoimmune diseases. It's really quite important. I think we all had one of Matthew Wood's book, but he's got many books. Right, let's look at gout. Traditionally considered a disease of kings or wealthy people, gout is a lifestyle symptom. It's associated with excessive consumption of acidic food, red meat or alcohol as well. So it is essentially deposits of uric acid within the joint, most commonly the big toe, as it is the furthest from the heart and has the weakest circulatory system around that. You know, it's the furthest to reach for the circulatory system. While a few simple herbs have a really good track record in the treatment of gout, the ultimate and only true cure is prevention through appropriate moderation of the diet and through alcohol intake. The two most popular remedies in history are cherry and nettle leaf. Both are excellent diuretics, cooling, antioxidant remedies which help to improve the inflammation and reduce the deposition of uric acid. Celery seed is also considered a specific remedy for the treatment of gout as well. Right. Okay, so we've looked at a bit of materia medica. Let's look at a little bit more. And again, I want to say it's really easy to tunnel in on someone's chronic pain and to try and make the pain go away and lose sight of the whole client. So what we really need to be keeping in mind when we think about pain is we try to regain a physical balance within the entire organism of the body. So work with the vital force to create this balance and identify the imbalance rather than just trying to get someone to be pain-free. And we have to also keep in mind that some causes of pain cannot be removed, in which case we must do whatever we can to improve the quality of life of the person. Some generalized types of pain people can experience are trauma or inflammation, muscular spasm, laxity, vascular pain like headaches, or a deep metabolic pain. So something that is differentiated or weighed worse by the morning or the evening or the cycles within the body, the pain being different at different times. Pain can be localized, not localized. There's also compensation pain. So as we attempt to guard ourselves from certain pains, the pain can radiate into the body, into different areas. So leading to tension, spasm or pain elsewhere because of the pain from somewhere else. There is also psychological and emotional stress responses to the pain to be considered. Loss of sleep, depression, and then pain becoming chronic. I'm going to put in the PDF section a chart. It's one of Paul Bergner's charts, which I'm going to use, which is, I think it might be useful. I found it useful before. So it's the aspect of the pain and then the potential herbal action for the pain as well. So I'll do that onto a PDF for you. So let's have a look at some herbs commonly used in the treatment of pain in the musculoskeletal system. Okay, let's start with California poppy. So California poppy coming under the anodyne section. It's one of our best anodyne remedies. What that means is it will help to slightly numb out an excessive pain response. It's especially beneficial because it also combines an antispasmodic as well and nervine action along with it, making it like a formula unto itself. So do you remember when we talked about formulation and we talked about finding a specific remedy that is the formula unto itself? Yeah. So again, this has got so much going on that it can be a formula unto itself. It's useful for pain when there is an accompanying nervous stress response, so an insomnia or a cramping and a tension. While it is a poppy, it does not contain opiate compounds like the opium poppy. Its taste is quite bitter, it's quite acrid, indicating its usefulness in heat excitation, tissue states, as well as wind tension. The best preparation of it is fresh whole plant while in flower. Roots, stems, leaves and flowers, the whole shebang. There is a signature on the leaves of the plants with the lining of the tips being red in colour, in contrast to the silvery blue colour of the rest of the leaves. A few classic herbalists talk about, my teacher certainly did used to talk about, that is a signature, a specific signature of the yeast forcing itself out to the periphery, driven to the surface with the tension, trapping it there. Yeah. This is one of our top anodyne medicines in Western Materia Medica. That makes an excellent lead herb in a pain formula. If you're not using it as a specific remedy, if you're using it in a formula, it's a really good lead. It's also worth mentioning that this is considered one of the best nervine medicines for children, though it doesn't taste very good. So that's debatable. if you can't administer. Right, okay, so still in the same section, we've got wild lettuce. So another of our anodynes. Wild lettuce contains a milky white latex which contains compounds similar to opiate-like constituents. It requires preparation which will make it more concentrated than a standard tincture, often achieved through macerating the fresh plant material in 95% alcohol multiple times and then gently evaporating off some of the alcohol to concentrate it. And this is one of these, some of these anodynes are going to be something that you're going to want to buy in. You're not going to want to have a go at making these. I don't think you're at that, we're not at that level. So you might want to think about that. You might want to think about a stockist for that sort of thing, or rather than thinking about how you actually create it. It's pretty potent nervine hypnotic, but it's also an excellent anodyne herb for relieving pain. It is very bitter remedy, which in higher doses will be quite cooling, and you need to remember that. It's cooling to the point of damaging a cold constitution and creating an imbalance. So it would decrease someone's willpower and motivation to be well. So you really need to think about your dosage and prolonged use of wild lettuce. Proper dosage varies between herbalists. 1 to 3 drops you could say is a low dose. You are going to want to look at your contraindications, and you will want to look at your formulas, and you want to look in some of your books that you bought during the course to see what some of the master herb. master herbalists, Matthew Ward and some of the greats, what are they saying about wild lettuce and how would you use it? Because we'd want to know, you want to be getting some indication from some people who've had experience in using wild lettuce before. What else do we talk about? Let's look at an antispasmodic. So antispasmodics, wind tension. We talked about lobelia earlier. Lobelia is one of our great antispasmodics. While it is extremely beneficial for all manner of muscular spasm, such as uterus, gallbladder, GI, it also proves of benefit for skeletal muscular cramping as well, and it can be applied topically as well as taken internally. Where lobelia truly shines in its application here, though, is for torsion of the muscles. So where there has been an injury that involves the muscles either twisting or in various directions, literally bending the frame out of shape. That makes sense. This is especially useful in the case of car accidents, and so trauma, impact, yeah, in which combines nicely with black coash as well. So when there is whiplash involved, lobelia, you know, it's classic. It's also a powerful herbal pair when treating this kind of if you combine it with cayenne pepper, it's a powerful pair in that it normalizes the circulation. So it's important to remember that lobelia truly likes to be delivered in a formula as it's a conductor. So it likes to be in charge. For want of a better word, it's really difficult to say this. So when it's with other remedies, it likes to be the lead. Yeah. So telling it where to go is best effective. So you've got other drivers behind it telling it where to go. So a small portion, say between 3 and 10% of a formula, can be extremely beneficial, especially whenever there is a tension or a spasm involved. So if you are using a pain formula and you've got, even if it's a small portion at the lead and a driver behind it, it can be really effective. What else have we got? Let's talk about black coash, because we've talked about that before. This is a North American antispasmodic. It has been pigeonholed really as a specific to women's medicine. However, being used with menstrual cramps and estrogen deficiency, but it has an incredibly relaxant antispasmodic for both smooth and skeletal muscles, especially when they are bound up from, like when we spoke about whiplash as well. So that tensioning. So it's a signature. Its signature is that flowering stalk. It carries with it that sort of the whip around the wind, you know, that's the stalk sort of, that's its signature. Again, Matthew Wood's got quite a lot to say about this, so please do look in your books on this one. And he's got quite a few formulas again that go together with mullein and other things like that. Let's look a little bit at dry atrophy. A plant that goes along with dry atrophy is mullein. So typically thought of primarily as a respiratory medicine, and we've done it in the respiratory system. It also has applications that are connected to musculoskeletal system. And again, this is pioneered by Matthew Woods. So sorry to keep quoting him, but you know, he's one of the greats. So please do look at that. And you know what? This is all part of our training all the time, is to dip into the people who've gone before us. So the people that the greats who are there, they're working now or who have worked in that way, please do drop into that. Again, there's a lot of if you look at the way that mullein is, it softens that which has turned hard. So if we think of it as softening the muscles surrounding an out of place bone or a dislocation or a joint, or an increase in the fluid secretion surrounding it, so allowing it to set back easier. So that's our main sort of use. However, like I said, some of our great herbalists have got a lot of experience in using this. Typically, it could be combined with black cohosh, again, with great effects. And typically, it's that corrective. You're looking at an increase in lubrication in the synovial fluids that is corrective. Yeah, does that make sense? It's corrective. Solomon seal, this is one of our most important remedies for musculoskeletal system, as it holds a broad range of actions upon the connective tissues, the joints, the fluids, the muscles and the bones. It's a sweet tonic, indicating its usefulness in a dry atrophy tissue state, and it has a cooling demulcent nature as well, so useful for excess heat and excess inflammation. I'm gonna have to get a drink. Shouldn't have done 3 hours talking without a drink. The roots hold signatures for the joints as they look like bones, which is great. And this remedy can be considered as amphoteric, so it's meaning that it will act upon the tissues as they are needed. So specifically in regards to their tone. Hang on a minute. Okay, drink. Got a drink. Where was I? Solomon seal, I think. Right, Solomon seal. Yeah, so sweet tonic, usefulness, dry atrophy. Yeah, roots hold signature for the joints as they look like bones, and connective tissues. So this, it will act as a remedy where it is needed. So it's one of those incredibly super magical plants that goes, what do you need of me? And so off it does. So how does it do that? It does that. It reacts specifically in regards to the tone that it finds within the vicinity. So if we have overly lax, it will tighten, and if we have overly toned, tight, it will loosen up. Solomon seal will help damp down an excessively inflamed joint. It will nourish and it will repair the tissues involved, and increase the synovial secretions to maintain its proper lubrication. So pretty fantastical. Because it has such a strong affinity for the connective tissues, it also has applications in prolapsed organs as well. And it's specifically useful if you think of it, because so many of our other herbs are quite drying, so we've got that aspect of it. Adding it to a formula can get that constitutional balancing effect of the moistening. Specific thing about this remedy is that it is best used for joints themselves, not so much for pain in the muscles, where you would reach for specific remedies for the muscles themselves, like the black coash, or the teasel as well. So worth mentioning is the false Solomon seal or dragon root. Again, I've not worked with this remedy, which is used essentially the same as true Solomon seal. And the main difference here, though, is that dragon root is best used where there is excessive bruising associated with an injury. Pleurisy root acts quite like mullein in that it's another remedy that is typically only thought of as with the respiratory system, and yet it's not. It's works with the fluid. Licorice, briefly mentioning licorice, excellent because it's cooling. We know this. It's moistening, demulcent remedy that can be formulated in a tincture and with other herbs to moisten the drying effects of other herbs. So I wanted to put that in there as well. It's also incredibly good for inflammation modulating, so it regulates that modulates the inflammation. It regulates it. What else to say about licorice? Licorice also, so if you've gone through the endocrine system, if we refer back to the endocrine system, and we talked about cortisol, and we talked about licorice lengthening the half-life of cortisol, so it works in that way as well, from an ove to maintain cortisol levels, which keep the inflammation in a regulation of inflammation. And as an adaptogen, it works in that way as well, as it helps to rebuild the fatigued adrenals as well. In which case we're going to see a help there with the liver to detoxify and metabolize the hormones. So yeah, it's really beneficial to consider in the treatment of pain, especially when there's a strong stress component associated with the pain. It's one of the best plants to combine with turmeric, because it modulates its over drying properties. So you'll often see licorice and turmeric together. And yeah, good as a simple, if we talk about it as, when we talk about formulation, if we talk about a triplet and we talk about licorice, turmeric and Solomon seal, if you think about the benefits of those three plants together, that's a really nice balanced triplet. Again, you want to be considering everything else that we spoke about. What else should we talk about? Let's talk about comfrey. I think we've talked about comfrey a little bit. Bone healers, wide range of applications, musculoskeletal system as indicated by the old folk name for comfrey is knit bone. Simple comfrey leaf poultice here, which is what I put on my finger. And it's not only going to work on the bone, it's going to work on the connective tissue around the bone as well. Again, the warning comes that it works a bit too well. So you want to know that you've got everything else in place before you start to use comfrey, because you want to know that the area has drained, the toxicity around the area is drained properly, and that the bone is set properly. You know, I'll say it again, don't mess around with broken bones, really, to be fair. Comfrey is a very useful cellular production and growth remedy in the healing process. So it works alongside the medical response that you get for your broken bones. Yeah, you can make an application, an infusion of the leaves, and make it into like a clay paste. But again, it's types of, and you know, you can also soak gauze in a comfrey tea, and then wrap that. And whatever you apply, it needs to be in a kind of intense, thick layer. You know, it's no good just going, and that's gonna, you know, it needs to be soaking into the skin. It really needs to get in there. It's also useful though. It's also useful if you think about it as a drawing agent. Yeah. Comfrey can be used for swollen or achy and inflamed or toxic joints, assisting in the removal of metabolic waste products. Again, it's working with that connective tissue around the joint. So again, you want to exercise caution so it's powerful. So don't be thinking, oh, this is an old wife's tale, because it's not. What you'd want to do is you'd want to do a few days of treatment at the most, and you want to keep observing how you're working with it. But yeah. What else? Horsetail comes under the atrophy because it has an ability to help rebuild connective tissues and bones. This is mainly because it has an extremely high level of silica, blah, blah, blah. So it's going to be working with the bone, cartilage, tendons, ligaments, as well as hair, skin, nails. So someone who is a horsetail person, or someone who is silica deficient, tends to be nervous, overwhelmed. They tend to get into patterns, like biting the nails, twirling the hair, picking skin. Yeah, it sounds gross, but you know what I mean. For rebuilding damaged joints, it's prepared quite nicely with Solomon's seal for obvious reasons. It's important to observe proper harvesting techniques with the remedy. Only plants growing in the shade should be picked, and it's best done in the early spring before the finger-like parts of the fronds descend too far down the stalks. So you know that if you look at a horsetail and the little, before they go too far down the stalk, generally anything at 45-degree angle or higher is acceptable. So when it's like that, anything below that is too far gone and may concentrate too many minerals for safe use. It's best taken as a tea. Or a spagyric in order to get the minerals. Many people note that the silica within horsetail is not bioavailable for the human organism to absorb and assimilate. Also that most people do have a silica deficiency because it is very abundant. It's, you know, a mineral. When we talk about it from a vitalist perspective, how to say this, it may not necessarily be that horsetail is providing the physical compounds of silica, but rather the intelligence of the silica. If that makes any sense. Again, this might be something, if you decide that you want to use this thing, it might be something that you want to buy in, maybe, so that you know it's prepared correctly. Right, so if we're looking at circulatory stimulants with a cold, damp tissue state, we mentioned prickly ash. So prickly ash works upon the nervous system and the circulatory system. So it has a diffusive effect. It's felt immediately after taking just a few drops of a tincture, which is interesting. It kind of tingles throughout the tongue and the mouth, increasing saliva production. It's a great remedy to add as a driver to a formula to open up that circulation and to move the herbs through the body, to make it easier to get the herbs to where you wanted the formula to be. But for the treatment of pain, it is one of the best for nerve pain. So along with St. John's wort, which I've not used prickly ash, but there's rave reviews about it according to Matthew Wood. But I have used St. John's wort, which I found was to great effect. It's best used with shooting or running pains along a nerve. So again, so for example, when we're talking about sciatica and that shooting nerve pain, excellent for that sort of thing. And that tingly sensation, and also arthritis in the joints from cold dampness as well. I think that's all to say about prickly ash. Celery seed is a really old remedy with long-standing use as an anti-rheumatic herb. There's that rheumatic word again. Celery seed, pretty much you're looking at warming, pungent remedy. It has a volatile oil content which increases circulation of the blood, and yet contains a complex group of flavonoids which modulate inflammation, and is, because of that, it becomes cooling. So you've got a warming effect and a cooling effect. So you've got a couple of things going on there. It can have a slight blood thinning property, allowing the blood to flow into hard to reach places, which you need to know the constitution of your client, and that's okay to do. Especially useful around connective tissues like cartilage, where the circulation is not directly connected. It's got a strong diuretic action, which is responsible for much of its benefits in the treatment of rheumatism and draining dampness. So it's draining it away, dampness that's accumulated in the joints. Celery seed is also has a mild antispasmodic and nervine action, which make it also suitable for treating musculoskeletal pain. Obviously, because of its diuretic action, it's going to be good for removing that the toxicity of that metabolic waste, or the stagnation around a joint. Which is why it's good for gout, because it's removing the uric acid build up. Let's talk a little bit about rosemary. Again, another traditional European specific rheumatic pain remedy. Rosemary combines the actions of circulatory stimulant to expel damp accumulation and antispasmodic for muscular tension as well, and inflammation modulating as well. So yeah, it's got a slight diuretic to help drain away moisture. Can also be applied topically as a infused oil, or an essential oil diluted in a carrier oil, for cold, achy joints and muscles. So it's going to be increasing the circulation, it's going to be draining dampness, and it's going to be warming up the system. So again, you're looking at cold muscular skeletal issues that fit under that bracket. Let's do ginger, another one of our great simple and straightforward circulatory stimulants. Ginger can be added to a formula as the driver, we know this. But also worth noting is that ginger is also one of the great inflammation modulating remedies, and can be used for hyperinflated or inflamed states. The strength of it is that it's warm and not overly hot, and will typically not overheat someone. Like rosemary, it makes an excellent ointment for topical use as well. When we look at cayenne pepper can be used internally as a circulatory stimulant. We spoke about this before, as a driver, but also operates biochemically on the pain response as well. It does so by draining from waste substances from the local area, and thereby it has an analgesic effect. This is typically achieved through topical application, though, So either by delivering the powder in a small amount of carrier oil or by using it as an ointment. Let's talk a little bit about turmeric, although I think everyone knows quite a lot about turmeric. Yeah, it's almost like everyone knows everything about turmeric lately. It's like turmeric's the word. I think the main thing to consider with turmeric is, it's hot. Yeah, it's anti-inflammatory, but you need to know your tissue state, and you need to know your contraindications. You need to know what your client is presenting as a constitution, whether it's assumed or whether it's their natural constitution. And you also you need to be aware of its potential heat. So it is incredibly good. However, you need to know what you're working with. Yeah, you need to remember what you're working with. It's very much put out there that it is an anti-inflammatory for all things. It's like, you don't just take it, don't be seduced by that. Think about what you're doing with your turmeric. Think about what the origin of the turmeric is. The best way to do it is to include, if you need to include the turmeric, it's pungent, it's warming, and it's very drying. So you need to have caution. And it's like, I can't take turmeric at all. It's way too hot. It's way too drying for me. So if you need to use it, then you need to be aware of its energetics, and you need to be using it in a formulated way to create a balanced effect. So you need to be counterbalanced in it, which is why a lot of people put turmeric with licorice. What else? It is, rather than it just being anti-inflammatory, it is also a potent circulatory stimulant. It's a digestive bitter. It's a calmative. It's got a hepatic decongestant and a hepatoprotective remedy. So it's really cleansing and protective, but again, you need to really be aware of what you're doing with it. So all these benefits are not going to be of benefit to everyone, and if you're going to apply it in the wrong situation or without balance, then you're going to make someone very much worse. So great, but think about it first. It is like a furnace to the digestive system. It's a decongestant to the liver and the gallbladder. It increases bile secretions. It moves the blood through the circulatory system. But you know what? Because of its drying and its specific indications, you have to understand that there are other plants that can do that, and that might not be the right plant. It's also a valuable alternative remedy with applications in chronic damp heat conditions, skin problems, liver stagnation. So if you think turmeric, don't just think of it in regards to musculoskeletal materia medica, but think of it as an integral part of the digestive system, circulatory system, relationship to the liver, detoxification. it's got all those other aspects, so consider these other aspects. Right, okay, a few other things. I wanted to talk briefly about teasel. Teasel, I don't think we've spoke about teasel much at all, really. This remedy has been gaining a lot of popularity over the last few decades as a primary remedy in the treatment of Lyme's disease, in particular the inflammation, the joint and muscular pain associated with Lyme's disease, simply by looking at the specifics of the teasel and looking at how it presents itself with its sharp, spiky presence, we can see that indicates that it's connected to the fire element, or to Mars. It's that explosion almost, and it's useful in the treatment of inflammation. The large leaves form a sort of cup that holds water at the base of the stalk, a signature for the joints of the body and their fluid-filled sac, so the joint being in the fluid. It's primarily used when the joints have been damaged from injury and are chronically inflamed or swollen. It also reflects the mental state that might occur from such injuries, so that's real tension. It can be used as a simple singular remedy to help people recover from surgery and repair damaged joints and muscles, or in a formula with other remedies like the ones we spoke about, like black cohosh and stuff like that, Solomon's seal, for example, or even lobelia. In the case of Lyme's disease, it is possible that it may aggravate the condition at first, but improve it with later use. Right, what else have we got to talk about? Let's talk briefly about St John's wort. Most people think about St John's wort and they think about it as being a nervous system remedy. We spoke about this before. Used for depression, melancholy, topical, puncture wound medicine, but its affinity for the nervous system makes it applicable specifically for nerve-related pain. I think that's quite obvious. So in the musculoskeletal system, not specific, it's not just specific for that system, but it can be used with pain in the muscles and the bones which involve the nerves. For that reason, that's why we include it. So you'd be using St John's wort whenever there is a shooting or sharp pain, nerve that travels a very specific pathway of the body, nerves that will be inflamed, will be painful, with associated heat and redness, and often accompanying muscular spasms as well. It's a very specific remedy for a pinched or a damaged nerve, or injury or of the nerve, which it can combine really nicely as a pair with prickly ash as well. Over long terms of use, it acts as a nerve restorative. This is where I've used it personally quite effectively, actually. So as a nerve tropho restorative, which we've talked about before, it can help to repair the damaged nerve tissue. For this, it combines very well with milky oats. We've talked about this in the nervous system. Skull cap as well. Lion's mane mushroom as well. It also makes an excellent topical application as an infused oil, if you want to use it like that. And let's also talk about willow. Okay, so willow bark. Got to mention willow bark. Likely to be one of the first herbs ever used in the treatment of musculoskeletal or other forms of pain. This is because of the presence of salicylate compounds which resemble aspirin. What most people don't know is that you'd have to consume such large amounts of the decocted bark to get just a quarter of a baby aspirin that you'd probably be sick. So from biochemical perspective, willow bark is not operating on the pain response simply by the content of its aspirin-like constituent. It must be operating on an energetic level beyond that. So it has ancient uses for the treatment of rheumatic pains, gout, inflammations of all sorts, even fever. Although I don't think we mentioned it in with our fever responses. It can be suppressive. So looking at the energetics of willow, we see that it tastes bitter, it's acrid, it's an astringent, and it's cooling. This makes it especially beneficial in painful symptoms associated with excessive heat and dampness. Think of it for such things as puffy, swollen, inflamed joints when there is poor digestion, leaky gut syndrome. The bitter facilitates digestion as a whole, and the astringency of the plants helps to tone the leaky gut tissues. So also for headaches, it may aggravate a cold deficiency type headache, but will likely be beneficial for a hot pounding excess type headache by helping to cool and drain the vital force down. And one last thing I want to look at is, I've spoken briefly about cannabis. All right, okay. I think I've said everything that I wanted to say about the use of cannabis. The medicinal virtues of the plant are outstanding. The treatment of chronic pain associated with cancer, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, rheumatism, is gaining momentum. The actions, just putting it down to the cold hard stuff, the actions are, it has an anodyne analgesic action, it's got an antispasmodic action, it has an anti-inflammatory action, it has a narcotic hypnotic effect, which gives it a nice spectrum of influence on the pain response. If we think about all the stuff that we spoke about in a pain response, we kind of covered it here with cannabis. However, you do want to be using it, first of all, it's illegal. Don't be thinking that you know it is illegal. What we're talking about, unfortunately, it's shit but illegal. And you do want to be using it in its most medicinal and confined form. So some CBD products are crap in their content. It defeats the object if you're getting wasted and high and you don't know what you're doing and you're just off your face. It needs to be used properly. So you need to be, you need to speak to someone who has experience in that before. And it, like I say, it's illegal. So we're talking about it, but it is actually illegal for you to suggest to someone. It is my opinion that it shouldn't be, but it is. And really, its true value is just beginning to be understood or explored. And it is hundreds of years behind, really, which is really sad. Because in the Victorian period, you could go into any pharmacy and purchase a cannabis in a tincture form. So anyway, that's a whole different subject. Right, okay. So what have I got left to give you? I think that everything else is for your PDF. I'm going to include on the PDF some lifestyle factors. I'm going to include in your PDF some herbal actions and some of the plants that we've just spoken about, so that you can actually print these off and add these to your notes and your folders. And I'm also going to include some formulas as well, so that you can print those off as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I was going to say it's a short video, but actually I do believe I've been talking for 3 hours. I feel like I've been going really fast as well. Do apologise for the interruptions from B and the sunshine and the barking. However, look out in your PDF section of the portal for your musculoskeletal system formulas and additional notes. And I will see you soon with our next organ system. Happy herbal.